Everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. I have a brand new copy of Blazon, a game of medieval heraldry by 25th Century Games. So let's just get right into it. Players will be placing cards on their own personal shield, signifying warriors who decorate their shields with patterns and mythological creatures. Heraldry refers to the design, the display, and the study of shields used to identify a person or a family. And that's exactly what you're going to be doing in this game. There are two types of cards. The Tincture Cards, which are represented by a circle. There are 40 of these in the game. And the Device Cards, which are represented by a square. There are 80 of those in the game. You will need to match certain icons on the cards in your hand with matching icons on your player board. Each box on the board has two options. You place the matching card over the non-matching icon so that the card and the matching icon on the board are both showing. But also, you should know after you play a card in a row, now all other spots in that row will need to follow either the top or the bottom that you already decided on by placing that first card in that row. So an initial card in a row will determine if you're going to be placing on the top or the bottom. There is one small exception, which is when you place a tincture card on a spot that has both a tincture icon on the top and on the bottom of its spot. You can adjust the card up or down when placing your second card in that row because it still meets the requirements when shifting it up or down. But if a card is already played in that row, then you'll need to follow its placement, placing that new card either on the top or on the bottom. As the game goes on, you will have less wide open options, but if you plan well, you will be rewarded with being able to play more cards quicker. Anyways, the point of the game is to score the most prestige. You gain prestige by playing element cards on your shield, like I've mentioned, by earning distinctions, which are goals placed out, and by being the first to pass milestones. On your turn, you can do one of two things. You can either do the acquire action, which consists of drawing two cards from either decks or one from each. You can then keep both of those cards, or you exchange one or both with the face-up display cards in front of those decks. There are 4 device cards on display and 2 tincture cards. And you can only exchange like-type cards for like-type cards. This action will increase your hand size and help you plan better in the game, and there is a limit of 7 cards to have in your hand, and at the end of your turn, you will need to discard down to that number if you are over. This acquire action is very nice, but the goal is to get those cards on the shield, which is what the Blazon action does. This is the other option that you can perform on your turn. You can place as many cards as you want or can during this action. To do this, you will need to meet the placement requirements, matching either top or bottom orientations if previous cards have been placed. You will then also need to pay by discarding any number of cards from your hand. Now, these discarded cards need to have a combined prestige value that equals or exceeds the prestige value of the card that you wish to place on your shield. After doing this, you will score the prestige points listed on that card by moving your counter on the outside of your board. This is probably the main way to score points. And when I say points, I mean prestige. Now, you can at any time place a new card over an old one, however, the alignment, the top or the bottom, cannot be changed. Also, when placing tincture cards, the cards cannot be identical within the top row or between the second and third rows within the third column. This is indicated by a slash through the equal sign. This is worth mentioning because there are less of these cards, and so that can be a little bit difficult in certain circumstances. In addition, on your turn, you can, at any point, discard one of your Herald tokens to take any one of the 4 bonus actions. These actions are to either place an element card from your hand onto your shield using the usual placement rules and paying only 1 prestige value cost from your hand, taking 1 element card from the face-up display or from the top of either deck, discarding all the cards in the display to refill them with fresh ones, or taking the top card from either discard pile to place back in your hand. Now everyone's going to be scoring prestige by placing out cards on their player board, and the first player to get to a milestone, which is the first to either 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50 prestige points, will get to immediately take one of the animal achievement tokens to score at the end of the game, and all other players will then gain one new Herald token. Each animal achievement token is worth 2 prestige points at the end of the game, and there is no difference between them besides the way that they look. In addition, players can choose to refresh the display of cards whenever there is at least 3 cards with identical element symbols, augmentation symbols, or prestige points, but this can only be done once during a turn. Now, as players plan out their turns, they should also know to plan around the distinction cards. These are like goals in the game, and when you achieve what the card says at the end of your turn, you can then place one of your markers on the leftmost open space of that card. So the first to achieve them will get a bigger reward, but all players have the chance to score them. Players will then take turns in a clockwise order, choosing one of the 2 actions, possibly using a Herald token for a bonus action, and then checking for their hand limit of 7 at the end of their turn, and then scoring any distinction cards until the end of the game is triggered. And this is done with either a player landing or passing 50 prestige points on their track, or a player fills every space on their shield board, or when a player claims the final distinction award. At that point, all other players have one final turn, and then final scoring occurs. For final scoring, you will take the prestige points that you already have on your board and add to them. First, for each of the 5 augmentations, the player with the most of each will score 2 points. Again, that would be the player with the most of these icons on cards on their player board. If tied between 2 players, both players will receive the 2 prestige points. But if more than 2 are tied, then no one gets the points. Players score points for their distinction markers on the distinction cards. Each unused Herald token is worth 1 prestige point each, and each animal achievement token is worth the 2 prestige points. The player then with the most prestige is declared the King of Arms and wins the game. That's the basic version of the game, but when players are ready, they can add in optional rules. One of these includes the abatement tokens. These are given to each player and can be used to break one of the placement rules. This would include placing a card in a different alignment from the one that the row would need to follow, or an element card can be placed so that the icon on the element card does not match the icon on the shield board. So they help place a card easier, but when playing with this abatement token, when a player ends the game with that token still placed on their board, then they will score -8 prestige at the end of the game. But there is also a way to get that abatement token off of your board, which is by placing a new card on top of the old card with the abatement token that's on it, and then that abatement token is returned, and also you will score the new card that you just placed down. This will change some strategy things in the game, but the abatement token can be used over and over again by placing it down and then placing a card over that token to get it back. There is another optional rule that makes the placement of cards a little bit different by adding in more strategy. I won't go over that, but you can figure that out when you play the game finally. And that's the game. That's it. So, what is there to like about this game? Well, it's nice that everyone can wrap their head around the 2 actions that you can perform during a turn, so you're not there trying to figure out what to possibly do on your turn. But still, within those 2 options, you have some choices to make. The game isn't just super simple. The game starts wide open, but as you play, you'll be closing yourself off to some things. So the game rewards those who can plan. But if you aren't good at planning, then you can still survive, as the Herald tokens will give you some extra actions to get things you need in a pinch. And if all fails, you just need to get a bigger hand of cards until you figure something out, which isn't a bad deal either. The more cards that you have, the more options you have. I tend to focus on one row of my board at a time so that I can finish it without problems. If I can't get a card down in that row, then I will move to another one, but will know that whenever a card becomes available that I need for that first row that I started, then I will go back to get that card. I will then continue with the second row until I need to, move on and still focus on finishing that second row while working on the third. Of course, the prestige listed on the cards are somewhat important, but for me, I like to focus on the distinction cards as well, trying to find the ones that would match with a row the best so that I can be the first to fulfill the goal and gain extra points. At any point, if I see another player close to completing something and I am close to it as well, I will go out of my way to place a random card down in another row in order to fulfill the distinction card before they do. And well, this happens quite often, but then I go back to my focus on the row that I've chosen that I'm working on. Now, there's definitely other strategies in playing. I've seen other players try to play a little more freely by going straight after distinctions that would allow them to be the first to cross more milestones, so they will most likely show up kind of as a front runner with a lot of points at the beginning of the game, but at the end of the game, it's much tougher for them as they will need to find more specific cards that fit in those specific spots on their board that they have missing. Anyways, the puzzle is fun to do, and that ultimately is the best thing that I think the game provides. The components are well done, the cards are square, so it makes it hard to shuffle them, and the cards seem to orientate themselves in all four directions, but it's not a big deal. I really like games with player boards and focusing on, your own little thing over here. There's hardly any player interaction in this game besides maybe taking a card that someone else wants or maybe racing for those distinctions first. Initially, I wasn't too excited about the theme, but I warmed up to it while playing the game. It wasn't too exciting, but with the player board, you are actually building your own shield that identifies you in the game, so it's kind of fun to see what you end up with at the end of the game. But ultimately, it's a puzzle. I like that points are awarded from not just placing down your element cards, but also the distinctions and the milestones. They both definitely beef up the game to something that I would like to play and want to play again. So this game will definitely see some time on my table, mainly because it's easy to learn and teach, but still requires game-changing strategy. There is no one best way to play this game. So build your shield to represent you with your family and friends in Blazon by 25th Century Games. Again, this is Boardgame Brody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.